Hello, Tech fans, and welcome in to episode 134 of the Tech Sideline Podcast, originating from TSL's high-tech studios in the Virginia Tech Corporate Research Center. We've got a great show planned for you today as we discuss the possibility of Virginia Tech opening their football season next week against North Carolina State, the impact of Devon Hunter's arrest and what that means for the secondary for the Hokies, what Jordan Payut's injury means for the receiving corps, and another sibling commits to Virginia Tech in Jack Hollyfield. It's all coming up on the Tech Sideline Podcast that gets started right now. And with that, we welcome you back into the Tech Sideline Podcast, whether you're watching live on Facebook, archived on YouTube, or listening on Apple Podcast, SoundCloud, Spotify, Google Podcast, or on Stitcher. We've got so many ways to consume the Tech Sideline Podcast. We're so glad you could join us as we record on Wednesday morning, September the 16th. We've got our managing editor, Chris Coleman, our founder and general manager, Will Stewart, the best producer in the land. He is Malcolm Stewart, and I'm your podcast host, Evan Hughes. Do want to correct in the open, it's Jaden Payut, not Jordan Payut, so I'm 0 for 1, but hoping to go 1 for 1 as I welcome it in you guys. Chris, Will, how are you guys doing today?
Pretty good. How are you?
Doing well? Well, it's getting a little chilly in Blacksburg right now. I feel like we've quickly gone from summer to fall.
Yeah, over in Radford, it was 45 degrees this morning, so my morning walk was on the treadmill, not out in the neighborhood.
I walked to the gym, and yesterday morning I walked outside, and within a couple of minutes I was like, man, I really should have put a hoodie on. It was pretty chilly.
Try and get going a little bit quicker there to get the blood flowing.
Oh, yeah, I've been doing that for like the last month and a half.
You know, Will, I do want to say, I know that Virginia Tech has such a great strength and conditioning program, but if they ever need somebody to fill in, I think Chris Coleman could be the ideal candidate.
I don't know about that. I actually have a former player as my personal trainer. So I'm getting a little bit of Mike Gentry and a little bit of Ben Hilgert because this guy was under both.
This guy was under both of them.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Yeah, so did not have a good day yesterday. Yesterday was not a good day for me, but this morning started off well. I was driving to work, and I was on Peppers Ferry Road 114, and somebody coming in the opposite direction flashed their lights, and sure enough, there was a police officer sitting by the side of the road. I tend to push it a little bit. Speed limit there is 35. I'm typically doing 45. Sometimes I'm doing more than 45, so really appreciate it. I know the person's probably not listening, but
It's just the universe looking out for you.
you know, I do it all the time when I'm going down through there and there are cops. I'm flashing lights, letting people know to slow down. So that's a good start to today. We'll see how the rest of it goes.
Well, I can promise the rest of the morning's going to be really good because we've got another podcast, our second of the week. Again, we're so glad you're with us. The Tech Sideline Podcast is brought to you each and every week by the Fisher Law Firm, Virginia's trusted DUI and traffic defense firm, dedicated to defending individuals charged with traffic-related offenses. The Fisher Law Firm handles cases throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia, and to date, the firm has defended tens of thousands of people charged with moving violations. For a free consultation, call anytime, day or evening, toll-free at 1-800-680-7031. Again, that's 1-800-680-7031. Or you can email the Fisher Law Firm at info@fisherlegal.com. So we begin the Tech Sideline Podcast this morning with an article that Chris wrote yesterday on the website, which I highly encourage everybody to go look at. It's called The COVID-19 Impact on Virginia Tech Football. On Monday, we spent a great deal of time talking about the Virginia Tech UVA game being postponed due to COVID-19 inside the Hokies program. There's a lot of information in this article, which leads me to lead off the podcast with this question for you, Chris. What are the odds that Virginia Tech opens their season next week against North Carolina State?
A source yesterday said at 50-50. Another one said maybe a little less than 50-50. Yesterday, I was at a little less than 50-50. Tech did get enough guys back yesterday to where they could hold a limited practice this morning. They still don't have anywhere near a two deep, from what I can tell, from what I've heard. But that made me feel a little bit better because I originally didn't think they were going to be able to start practicing until this weekend. So I think I've upped my opinion to 50-50. So, but I still don't think it's a definite for sure. And that's basically what Justin Fuente said on Monday. They asked him, are you optimistic that you'll be able to play against NC State? And he was like, I'm neither optimistic or unoptimistic. I just don't have enough information right now. It depends on when we get certain guys back.
Yeah, and so when did he say that? Was that yesterday?
That was Monday.
Monday, okay. And if I remember, he basically said, I need to see what the numbers are today before I can really answer that question. So what's today, the 16th?
16th.
So we're 10 days out, and, he really needs enough guys to play / full strength, whatever, probably about a week out.
Yeah. And if you think about the timing of when NC State postponed this game originally, they postponed it 3 weeks in advance. Okay, they postponed it on August 26th. It was set for August 12th, so 2.5 weeks in advance. So really, what you're looking at here is, when a player tests positive, he's out for 10 days, at least 10 days, because he has to get his heart checked too, and you have to make appointments for those.
And this is the ACC protocol.
These are the ACC protocols. And sometimes that takes several days. That's out of a school's control. Maybe it probably happens a little bit quicker for a UNC player or a Duke player because they have the medical schools down there, right? Yeah. And then if you go through contact tracing, if you're dinged in contact tracing, you're out for 14 days, and that's 14 days no matter what. Like, I was mistaken on Monday. Like, you can't test and then test negative twice and then return. It's 14 days no matter what. It's
14 days no matter what.
Right. Yeah. So that's 14 days of you not playing football and not practicing, and you're just stuck at home. Like, I don't know exactly what the quarantine rules are, but I know you can't go to the gym.
It's pretty much you can't go anywhere, stay inside.
Yeah. So, like, you could go outdoors and find a nice empty spot and get some conditioning in, but if you get caught, you're going to get in trouble, right? Yeah. I actually know a guy in Blacksburg, like maybe 5 or 6 weeks ago. His dad tested positive, and he was exposed to his dad, so he had to quarantine for 2 weeks. And then he went back to work, and then yesterday his roommate tested positive, so now he has to quarantine again for 2 weeks. Right? So that's brutal, particularly when you work a job that based on you have to be in your physical, he works in the service industry. Yeah. He has to be there to make money, right? So it's definitely rough in Blacksburg right now as far as that goes. But when you're without, Tech was basically, from what we understand, without half their team basically when they postponed the UVA game, and it wasn't the fact that they didn't think they would get. Technically speaking, they would have enough of guys to play, but they would be getting guys back right now with the game this coming Saturday. They started getting guys back yesterday, and they're going to trickle in between now and early next week. And they will not have practiced for 2 weeks, those players. They're not going to be in football shape. And the likely scenario is Virginia Tech would have just gone out there and gotten their butts kicked because they didn't have a roster. They wouldn't have had a roster with guys ready to play.
Really ready to
play. And if you're not physically ready to play, the more likely you are to get hurt. And that's why Justin Fuente phrased it like he did on Monday. He basically said, I couldn't in good conscience send them out there. It wouldn't have been safe for them because they hadn't been working out. They hadn't been running. They had no football pads on for the last 2 weeks. And that's a sport. There's a reason. Like, I remember when I played in high school, we practiced for 2 straight weeks before we had our first scrimmage, right? Before they would let anybody scrimmage. Mm-hmm. You have to practice a full week before you can actually put the pads on and even hit, right? So there's a whole process in football. Even the guys they've had out, by rule, they're not allowed to jump back into it immediately with full pads.
The protocol says something about integrated back into gradually.
Right. Yeah. Now, NC State did it 2.5 weeks before the game, right? Yeah. and I guess Virginia Tech 2.5 to 3 weeks for NC State, thereabouts. And Virginia Tech canceled the UVA game a week before it was supposed to happen, and which was 2 weeks before the NC State game is supposed to happen. So if NC State said 2.5 weeks previously, we can't safely play 2.5 weeks from now. Well, Virginia Tech, when they canceled the UVA game, that was 2 weeks before the NC State game. So the precedent that NC State set 2.5 weeks in advance means that Virginia Tech probably won't be able to play against NC State if they hold to that precedent.
Right.
Now, there's obviously certain pressures to play. It's not a good situation either way. Like, I don't think Virginia Tech is going to be physically ready to play NC State. They're going to go out there with a team that's not quite physically ready, and they're going to be playing a team with a game under their belt. That's not a good situation. But the other scenario is you cancel / postpone the NC State game again. You open at Duke the next week on October 3rd, and you're in better physical condition to play, but Duke has already played 3 games at that point, and you will have played none. So it's just not a good. Neither choice is good.
Yeah, so I was thinking about this. Of course, Chris wrote the article yesterday, and I read it and thought about it. And you know, the timing for Virginia Tech is really bad to have this many guys out. Clemson back in, I believe it was June that Clemson had 37 guys test positive.
Whenever the players first came back.
Yeah.
Whatever date that was.
So they had a lot of positive tests back in June. So their guys, you know, and
remember, if you test positive, you don't have to test again for 90 days.
Right.
So that was the other thing I did want to throw in there. That's something I learned from your article. 90 days from when you test positive. So essentially,
theoretically, if every single Virginia Tech player had tested positive on September 1st,
you'd have them through December 1st.
Right. We would have missed the opener, but then we're back after that, and nobody on the team would have to test again until December 1st.
Yeah.
So Ed Orgeron came out yesterday and said almost all of his team has already had it.
How did that happen?
Oh, imagine that. Yeah. It favored, obviously, North Carolina and North Carolina State started school, was it a week or 2 weeks earlier than Virginia Tech?
It was fairly early.
It was early.
I think,
Yeah. So their football teams had their issues 2 to 3 weeks before. Yeah. And that coincides when the student bodies were returned. Now, Virginia Tech's getting a lot of flack right now because that 2 to 3 week window after students return happened to come at the start of football season. So Virginia Tech had to cancel the UVA game, right?
Yeah. For
UNC and NC State, obviously NC State had to postpone the Virginia Tech game, but since since school started earlier, their outbreak was a couple of weeks earlier. So their entire season isn't going to be affected by this. You know, UNC apparently had some guys out too for a good stretch, and it just didn't get reported because they weren't actually playing football then. So you just keep your mouth shut if you're Mac Brown.
They weren't making play and no play decisions.
Right. So you're Mac Brown. You keep your mouth shut and you don't say anything. Which obviously our fans would be mad if Justin Fuente did that, but that's what Mac Brown does, and he doesn't tell anybody. They look horrible against Syracuse for the first 3 quarters.
Yeah.
They looked like a team that had a bunch of guys out for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
You know, in a couple of weeks before the game. So I didn't foresee. No, we sat on this podcast several months ago saying it's going to be an odd season because you're not going to know from a week to week basis who you're going to have or who the opponent's going to have. You don't know who's going to test positive, and everything like that. But we didn't foresee the contact tracing.
And 2 weeks of quarantine.
2 weeks of quarantine. That's what we didn't know.
Yeah, I want to read real quick just to sum up for those that maybe weren't with us on Monday's podcast. I actually want to read just 2 quotes that you put in your article from yesterday that actually Jake Linemen transcribed. This was Justin Fuente on Tech Talk Live. He said, quote, "I'll do my best to try to explain it, but you've basically got 2 groups. You have the symptomatic or positive test. If you're positive, you have to isolate for 10 plus 1 days, and then you also have to get an echo on your heart. That can lengthen the process a little bit because you have to get those scheduled, and there's a lot of pressure on the medical community, not just here in Blacksburg, but across the country. Those things aren't just snap your fingers and go. If a guy is positive, it's 10+1 from his symptom date, and if he's asymptomatic, it's just 10+1. Sometimes that drags on because we have to get the heart work and labs done before they can return to play. If you are in contact tracing and are around somebody who is positive, that's 2 weeks in quarantine, assuming you don't test positive. That's 2 weeks on the shelf, removed from the football team. You can see how it can get pretty big pretty quickly, close quote.
Yeah, so whether you test positive or whether it's just through contact tracing, you're basically out for 2 weeks. And it's not quite starting from scratch, but it's close. So like Tech started practice around August 5th, thereabout. Let's say it was August 5th. And let's say 14 days later, you get dinged for contact tracing and you're out for 2 weeks. So you just practiced for 2 weeks and now you don't do anything for 2 weeks. So when you do come back, on September 3rd, you're starting from scratch. Right?
More or less, yeah.
So anybody who Tech lost in August when September started, they were starting from scratch. These guys now, they're not going to be quite starting. They're coming back now. It's not like they're quite starting from scratch, but it's close. Because if you remember, Tech didn't practice for like 3 or 4 days after the NC State game originally got postponed. And at the time, you were thinking, oh, he's just giving them a few days off since, they don't play that early game now, rest their bodies, blah, blah, blah. No, that was back when we heard that most of Tech's offensive line was out. So yeah. I think he basically shut the program down then, and they just didn't make the announcement like they did this time. Right. NC State had already made that announcement for them, right?
Right.
Yeah, so there was no need to do it. So, so it's not like these guys are going to be coming back. They've missed 2 weeks, but they've really missed more than 2 weeks because Tech's program was basically shut down for 3 or 4 days before that already. So Virginia Tech has not had 2 straight weeks of practice. Even the healthiest players, the guys who haven't been dinged for contact tracing or tested positive, they haven't had 2 straight weeks of practice or anything like that.
And remember, this is on the heels of no spring football, right. Players not being around for proper strength and conditioning. Right. It's right. really starting to build.
Well, one thing I think about too, Will, is the fact that you're looking at it. You brought up the whole week by week, how we were looking at the offseason. You don't know who you're going to have necessarily, who the other team's going to have. I think about the continuity and the fact that we talked so much about, how about last year, about all the O-line being together in the same group. I mean, how about continuity, the fact that you might not have the same guys out there every single week to gel with?
You're right. And how in the heck can you make an accurate, informed decision about the starting quarterback position when half the line is out one day, the other half's out maybe the next time, and you got receivers in and out. This guy's out for 2 weeks. He comes back. Oh, we got our starting receivers today. Oh, nope, he got dinged. Contact tracing. He's done. Finally, we got them all back there together. Oh, Jaden Payout breaks his leg. So those guys haven't been together enough to even where I think you could even accurately judge the quarterback position. Even Burmeister was out last week. Remember the day they made the announcement, he couldn't go to interviews because he wasn't allowed in the program that day. I assume because of contact tracing.
Right. So this is a big challenge that Justin Fuente is facing, and so you're trying to get through the immediate issues and just get to the game against NC State or get to the game against Duke. And what if somebody tests positive again after that, and you whack 10 more guys into contact tracing? But back to your point about continuity, one of the things I used to think about, I don't know, this is neither here nor there, but when Frank was running the program, we used to get to go see the scrimmages. Mm-hmm. And most of the scrimmage was spent with 1-on-2 and 2-on-1. Yeah. So the second string quarterback was playing behind the second string offensive line against the number 1 defense. And the second string quarterback generally didn't have a chance to do anything. Yeah. And this is at a time when Virginia Tech's offensive line was A, bad, and B, not deep at all. Mm-hmm. So the number 2 guy would be out there behind a couple of not good walk-ons.
Our starters on the offensive line couldn't block. Then the backups would be out there trying to block Chris Ellis and Vince Hall and people like that. It was ugly, awful. Like, I don't know how the backup quarterback or the backup wide receivers actually could get better in that environment because they had no chance to actually I mean, the quarterbacks would drop back and he wouldn't have a chance to throw the ball.
So,
I mean, there were scrimmages back then where there would be like 13 sacks.
When I was in high school, I went to Albemarle High School in Charlottesville, and my senior year we went 0-10, and the year after I graduated we went 0-10. And our quarterback was a guy that grew up in a neighborhood near mine, and he was very elusive, and that's why he was our quarterback. Because I can't demonstrate this just if you're just listening, and I really can't get up and demonstrate it even on the video. But he would come away from center, and as he was backpedaling, the defensive line was already chasing him. And how can you evaluate a quarterback who's spending all this time running for his life?
He was the Tyrod Taylor of Albemarle County.
Oh man, that guy! I remember playing in the neighborhood against him when we were kids before he even got to high school and became the starting quarterback. That dude was shifty, man. He was hard to tackle.
Chris, can we get the Pro Football Focus grades on the offensive line and the percent of dropbacks that quarterback had to face?
Yeah, right.
So anyway, if you got a bunch of guys out and you have a lack of continuity, that's kind of what it's like. It's just tough.
Let's transition quickly away from staying on the topic. But one thing that came to mind when I was prepping for the podcast, we've spent a good amount of podcasts back over the summer and late in the spring talking about the financial ramifications of what a football season means to Virginia Tech athletics and how it helps fund the other sports. If a game were to be canceled, let's just say one game, and not made up, any idea the financial ramifications that one game could have on the program?
So, to my knowledge, there has been no information released about how the financials for the TV money that comes into the ACC are going to work this year. I don't know that ESPN and ABC has said anything. I just don't know. If you have fewer games, then you have fewer commercials running, there's less revenue, and how does that revenue get distributed? So the TV revenue might not be affected. They may just make a blanket statement, we're taking all the revenue that's coming in, we're splitting it this way, regardless of how much you do or don't play. So going back to the old Big East days, the Big East was one of the few conferences that paid you more for actually being on television. They didn't just evenly distribute the TV revenue. You'd get a bit of a premium if you were actually on television. Instead of making $150,000 for a game, you'd make $250,000 or something like that. That has not been the way things have been done for many years, and the Big East was frankly the only conference doing it that way back then. So we don't know about the TV money. And in Virginia Tech's case, when you lose a home game, they're not selling any tickets. They're not allowed to have more than 1,000 people in the stadium. And so that's not even 1,000 fans, in quotes. It's 1,000 people. So Virginia Tech isn't even selling tickets. So I would put forth the theory that it might actually save Virginia Tech money to not have a home game because they wouldn't have to pay the costs of putting the game on.
And they're going to get the TV money anyway, most likely, assuming it's all split evenly.
Yeah.
No matter, because I don't think you can. There's going to be certain things that are out of schools' control over whether they can play. I mean, there might be a point where like Syracuse can't play a game because they're in the state of New York, and New York decides
and
to
the governor just decides we're going to call off contact sports.
Right. That's unlikely, but it's possible. And in which case, that's out of Syracuse's control. So can you punish them for that? Yeah. Can you sit back and say, we're not giving you any TV money this year because your governor said this? Right. So I'm guessing all schools are splitting that evenly. And remember, Notre Dame's involved this year, and they're splitting the NBC money with the ACC.
Okay, I do remember seeing that. Yeah.
So I don't think canceling a game has a financial impact on Virginia Tech this year. I really don't.
On a school that's allowed to have fans in the stands like Clemson, I think I've seen anywhere from 16 to 19,000 fans. So we discussed this probably on the website or the message boards or whatever. If Virginia Tech could have 15,000 fans in Lane Stadium, and I'll go on record as saying that I think it's just patently ridiculous that only 1,000 people are allowed in Lane Stadium. I'm not making a political statement. I'm making a judgment statement. I just think that's stupid. They should be allowed to have 10 or 15,000 fans, properly distanced, et cetera, et cetera. It's the way they're doing it everywhere else, but they're not allowed to do that at Virginia Tech. Let's say Tech could have 15,000 fans per game. It's it's hard to say how much demand there would be for those tickets. A lot of people aren't going no matter what, but let's say you had 20,000 fans that wanted to go. You could probably charge up to $100 a ticket for the 15,000 that want to go.
There's a lot of people at Florida State and a pretty good crowd at Notre Dame.
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
There was a good amount of people at Florida State. I saw the rerun.
A lot of people. Honestly, that looked like a normal Florida State game, to be honest with you.
Well, because to go off on a bit of a tangent, looking at Florida State, the people who are still going to games are the diehards who are going no matter what. Yeah. But if you were selling 15,000 tickets at $100 a pop, that's $1.5 million.
Right.
6 home games, right?
Well,
$9 million.
I did the math, and let's say Virginia Tech plays 0 home games in front of a crowd this year, in front of a paid crowd. They just keep it at 1,000 by state law. And Clemson sells 15,000 tickets per game. I'm being conservative here. $50 a pop for 6 home games. That's like $5.7 million. Right. So Virginia Tech is already millions behind Clemson in terms of revenue and donations and things like that. Anyway, well, now they're going to be a further $5.7 million behind them, simply because the state law in South Carolina is different than the state law in the state of Virginia.
And North Carolina has come out and said no fans at all for the month of September. We don't know what decision they're going to make.
Thank goodness, because they're already $12 million ahead of us because of their stupid in-state scholarship rules.
Well, yeah. So Chris needs to clarify that at UNC. From what we understand, every student athlete, the athletic department pays in-state tuition, whether they're in-state or out-of-state.
Right.
And their scholarship bill winds up being, Virginia Tech's scholarship bill runs in the range of $15 million a year. UNC's apparently runs at about $6 or $7 million a year.
Yeah, if that. So they're saving millions that they can invest in big coaching staff, big recruiting
staff, facilities.
Yeah. Just because. When Mac Brown was their head coach back in the 90s, that law was on the books when he was there then. And then he left and they took it off the books, right? And so out-of-state students had to count as out-of-state scholarships, which cost them a lot more money. As soon as Mac Brown gets back, they reverse the law and bring the old law back. So apparently Mac Brown is so big in that state, he can just go into the North Carolina legislature and say, I'd like this done, and they say, okay.
Yeah.
Can I just say, I think it's incredible that you guys can talk X's and O, we can talk finances and money, and we can talk about legislature and government. I mean, you guys really are the perfect dynamic duo that we have here on the Tech Sideline podcast.
So some of the people listening or watching may not even know. Scholarships are not free. The athletic department pays the school for the costs of educating the student athletes.
That's what the Hokie Club is for, basically, for those who don't know.
The Hokie Scholarship Fund.
The Hokie Scholarship Fund. Like, for example, I'm in the Hokie Club. I send in my donation, and everybody else sends in their donation, and that gets put in the pot, and then at the end of the year or beginning of the year, a big fat check gets written by the athletic department to the academic side for all Virginia Tech scholarship student athletes for their education. And that's how it works.
And I don't know off the top of my head how many scholarship student athletes Virginia Tech has. Back in the independent Atlantic 10 Big East days, Virginia Tech didn't fully fund all the scholarships. Again, to educate people that don't know this, every sport has a certain number of scholarships that they are allowed. Football and both basketballs, every athlete gets a full scholarship. You go over to a program like baseball, they get something like 11 full scholarships, and they have to distribute that among a roster of 20, 30 guys.
Yeah. Yep.
There are very few players in the non-revenue sports or athletes in the non-revenue sports that are on full scholarship.
There are none, I don't think.
Well,
I think just football, men's basketball, and women's basketball.
But if you look at softball, but it's at a coach's discretion.
Right.
Softball will sometimes, from what I understand, you may know more, Evan, they will give a full scholarship to a pitcher because pitchers matter.
Pitcher deserves one, that's for sure. You're right.
And then everybody else gets a half scholarship, third scholarship, quarter scholarship, nothing at all. That's the way it works across all those other sports. So, but anyway, there's a certain number of scholarships that the Virginia Tech Athletic Department has to pay, and it adds up to $15 million a year.
Right, and at Virginia Tech's peak, all their scholarships for all those sports were not fully funded. So Virginia Tech did not have a full complement. They were not paying for a full complement of student athletes. Yet at the same time, they had the third highest paid football coaching staff in the country. And that was the peak of the Virginia Tech football program when Virginia Tech was putting no resources into the Olympic sports at all and just dumping it all into football.
Speaking,
And now Virginia Tech fully funds everything else, and they're much higher paid Olympic sports coaches, and now they're only 35th or 40th in football salary. So, and since then, Virginia Tech has gotten worse at football, generally speaking, and they've gotten better in the Olympic sports. I mean, it's kind of a shining example of you get what you pay for.
Yeah. Yep.
We still have a lot to get through here on episode 134 of the Tech Sideline Podcast. We're going to step aside for a break, but when we come back, we'll talk about the impact of Devon Hunter being suspended indefinitely by the Virginia Tech football program, what it means for the safety room, and we break down the loss of Jaden Payute after his injury and what that means for the Tech offense. We're back in just a few. You're listening to and watching the Tech Sideline Podcast, brought to you by the Fisher Law Firm. Back in episode 134 of the Tech Sideline Podcast, continuing on as we record on Wednesday morning, September the 16th. Glad to have you with us. He's Chris Coleman. He's Will Stewart. We've got Malcolm Stewart, the best producer in the land, taking your Facebook Live questions, which we will get to at the end of the show. It's time for another sponsor read. We're glad to have the Southeast Regional Training Center back with us for another year. And, Will, I know they're doing great things right now with the Virginia Tech wrestling program as well.
I joke all the time that Tony Roby makes everybody else look bad, because Tony's program faces all the same challenges that other Virginia Tech programs face, and yet he's racking up the top 5 recruiting classes nationally, usually top 10, top 5 also. Outstanding recruiting classes, and a lot of that has to do with Southeast Regional Training Center, and that is a we don't want to get too bogged down in the minutia of it, but it is a separately funded, separately run thing from the Virginia Tech wrestling program, and it is staffed with resident athletes and resident coaches who are training for the Olympics. They're not Virginia Tech wrestlers. They're not even college wrestlers anymore. So the way it works is these regional training centers are kind of run in concert with college programs. And so any athletes that you recruit into your wrestling program can practice and wrestle against the wrestlers and learn from the coaches in your regional training center. So Tony's done a really good job of fundraising for his RTC, because they are run off private donations. That's how they run. And the more donations you get, the higher caliber of coach and resident athlete you can attract to your regional training center. And that attracts better recruits to your wrestling program. And so it's a huge part of, we're used to the Virginia Tech wrestling program being really successful, and the Southeast Regional Training Center has a lot to do with that. So they've been sponsoring Tech Sideline for years, and we really appreciate them coming on board again. And so just go check out southeastrtc.com, and Tony's got a video there explaining things, and that's where you can donate.
You got to wonder, if Tony Roby woke up tomorrow morning and decided he didn't want to coach wrestling anymore, would he actually be able to make more money, in sales or fundraising and things like that? Because he's really, really good at fundraising.
He's taken it to another level, and that's even under Kevin Dresser, the Virginia Tech program was good, but the recruiting under Tony is really
just taken off.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is, you can put it down to his greatly improved fundraising for the Southeast Regional Training Center, in my opinion.
And it's when you look at the recruiting classes, it's tough to be patient and wait for those guys to mature, because he's got a good wrestling program, and they're just going to get better.
Yep. I'm looking forward to wrestling season. We were talking before the podcast started today. There's potentially some news that's going to come out today about the college basketball season. So as fall sports continue on, we get closer and closer to winter sports.
Yeah, they're voting today on when to start college basketball, apparently. And rumor is they're going to start it on November 25th.
What is that, the day after Thanksgiving or something? I think the 30th is a Monday.
Normally it starts November. It would start on November 10th. But and we don't know.
Okay. So
we don't know what schedules are going to look like. We don't know in what form this season is going to take. But sounds like something is going to start up around November 25th. So you're talking, what is that?
That is the day before Thanksgiving.
Wow.
That's kind of weird.
So that's like 9 weeks from now.
Yeah.
It'll be here before we know it. All right, let's keep going on and talking about the Virginia Tech football program. We stay on the gridiron, and we just mentioned this news just before we signed off the podcast on Monday, but it was announced on Monday evening, reported by Mike Niziolek of the Roanoke Times, that Hokie safety Devon Hunter was arrested on Sunday by Christiansburg police for felony strangulation to cause wound or injury and misdemeanor assault against a family member. He has been suspended indefinitely by the Virginia Tech football program. Will, let me start with you because you really touched on it towards the end of the podcast. Somebody who was a big-time recruit when he came in, didn't get a ton of playing time early, but was poised for a breakout season. How big of a loss is this for the Hokies?
It's hard to say because, Devon was having trouble getting into the rotation and getting his career going. And I remember watching him on the field against ODU, the dreaded ODU loss.
He had to start that game because there was an injury.
Yeah, and I'm not that sharp of a football observer, but I could tell he was didn't really know where to go and what to do. So it's been kind of a long play for him, even though he was a very highly rated recruit. But Justin Fuente has spoken highly of him, and I really appreciate the kid staying with the program and continuing to work hard and being patient, because that is a rarity these days. A lot of athletes are just, hey, it's not working out here, I'll just transfer out. It's not my fault, it's their fault. Mm-hmm. But he applied himself, and Fuente always speaks very highly of him. So it's just yes, it's a loss on the field. We don't know how big. Chris has said on podcasts that we'd heard he was doing really well and really coming along, and this might finally be his moment. But, the proof is in the pudding. Was he really going to play on the field and be an effective player? We don't know, and we may never know. So there's an issue of on the field, but off the field, it's just disappointing for a guy that had been plugging away for so long. And what effect is this going to have on recruiting in the 757? Because, he's one of the few very highly rated recruits they've gotten out of the 757 recently. So you might sit there and say, well, that's no reflection on Virginia Tech or Justin Fuente. That's a mistake that Devon Hunter made. That's not the way it's looked at in recruiting circles. In recruiting circles, they want the kid from their area to go be successful at your school, and the details are not really important. So that can't be a good thing. And to clarify something, there's a lot of confusion about assault on a family member. I was actually on the phone with someone the other day when this was being discussed, and this someone was sitting next to a former deputy. And the deputy said a family member can include anyone that you live with, under this particular statute of the law, I guess, can include anyone you live with or anyone with whom you have had a child. So we'll just leave it at that. It's not necessarily a brother or a sister or a parent or something like that. It could be a situation like that. And we talked about this before we even started the podcast today. I don't care. I don't want to know what the details are. I don't want to pass judgment. I don't want to get down into the timing of things. All I know is a Virginia Tech football player who was at least part of the two deep has been lost. And since this is an issue that most likely involves a female, I don't think you'll ever see him back again playing for Virginia Tech. And that's what I think about all that. And,
I mean, it's unfortunate, but for all the reasons Will enumerated, how well thought of you could see the reaction from the players on Twitter.
The players were just crushed.
Yeah, because he's a very, very popular member of the team. Very well. Everybody respects his work ethic. I mean, he's a very, very good culture fit from that standpoint, as far as how hard the guy works, showing up every day. Like, he didn't let the fact that he didn't live up to the hype early affect him. And like Will said, run off and transfer like you see most of Penn State's running back room do these days, right? So it's disappointing from that standpoint, But I don't know any details, so I can't say anything.
Let's transition to this, though.
How does it affect the team?
Let's transition to that, because Corey Van Dyke had written about it, and he actually mentioned that Nasir Peoples might have been a prime candidate to take that spot if he didn't have that season-ending injury that he suffered over the summer, I believe, or fall camp when he got back. But it sounds like J.R. Walker is the prime candidate. Chris, what do we know about the redshirt freshman?
I would think it would be J.R. Walker. I know in the 2019 spring game, I was really impressed with him at free safety. I mean, this was a guy who enrolled early, and he already looked the part. He was a 4-star recruit, too. He was a highly touted kid with a big offer list, and he's not as well known as Devon Hunter in the program with Virginia Tech fans, of course, because Hunter was an in-state recruit, and his recruitment was very public, and it was long, and it was drawn out. J.R. Walker's from Raleigh, North Carolina. Everybody thought he was going to NC State until the day he committed to Virginia Tech, so nobody paid any attention to his recruitment at all. The reality is, if you go back and watch their tape and look at a lot of their offers and things like that, I mean, J.R. Walker's just as good a prospect, to be quite honest with you. Yeah, so I know Bud Foster had a lot of great comments about him. So I was really impressed with him in that spring game. A big guy who could run, and he looked the part, and I think he can tackle in space. Now, he was playing at free safety then. I don't know where he's been practicing since then. I suspect at various points of his career he's played both, because coaches like to see – they'll at least pick a couple practices in the spring and just to see what other, like, can this free safety play rover if need be, or things like that. But Virginia Tech didn't have spring practice, so so I don't know if that.
Real quick, Will, I want to ask you this because it was mentioned that Devon Hunter was supposed to take the spot of Reggie Floyd. Used to be the rover, but now it's called the boundary safety. In a nutshell, in 60 seconds or 2 minutes or so, can we explain what the differences is in the scheme and how that rover is different from the boundary safety, or is it the same thing?
Well, we don't know. But you could have called it the boundary safety before. The rover.
Talking generalities of free safety versus strong safety.
Correct. Yeah. Right. The boundary safety is always the rover was always on the short side of the field. And he's a deep safety, just like the free safety. No, in the term rover was a holdover from the old Virginia Tech scheme from back in the 90s and early 2000s, when Virginia Tech really only played one deep safety, and the rover was always up in the box. And in fact, even back in the day, the whip was actually on the short side of the field, and the rover was on the wide side of the field.
And Jim Kavanaugh used to coach the whips and the rovers,
right? Because
so
they were pretty much
an outside linebacker.
They were pretty much the same position, right? And then Tech made the scheme change in 2004, and rover basically became a traditional strong safety, always a deep safety on the short side of the field. So basically, the name should have changed 15 years ago, quite frankly. Yeah. The guy was no longer roving. He was just a regular safety, but they just didn't change the name.
Yeah, rover could go anywhere from deep coverage all the way up to close run support.
Right. I mean, he was all over the place. So really, the name should have changed 15 years ago. It has no impact on – just because they changed the name now doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be asking that player to do anything differently. It just means that Justin Hamilton looked at it and said, that's not what that guy does anymore. So we're going to change his name to something a little more normal.
Thanks for the clarification. Yep. And so it sounds like J.R. Walker, someone who's going to step up. Also sounds like two names that are going to have to step up early for Virginia Tech on the field as we transition from defense to offense is Changa Hodge from Villanova and then Evan Fairs from Kansas because of the fact that Jaden Payute will be out indefinitely due to an injury. So, Will, you look at this receiving core. I know Payute was somebody who had a lot of praise in camp. Of course, he's a high prospect. How big of a loss is that for Tech's offense?
It's for me, this is going to sound like a weird thing to say, but it's more of an emotional loss because that guy he came out of nowhere in recruiting. He didn't have a whole lot of, and Chris can help me out here. He didn't have a whole lot of rep in recruiting, and then suddenly he did. His numbers, his testing numbers when he went to camps were crazy. Very great physical talent.
He ended up number 4 in the state, I think.
Yeah, I think so. And Justin Fuente loved his skill. Never mind the measurables. He saw him in camp and loved his skill and that's the guy you want, a guy who was mostly under the radar until he committed. It all happened. I remember it all happened very fast. He became a thing and he committed, and suddenly he was a number 4 player in the state. So it's a bummer that, again, it's another guy who it was his time to shine, and he's not going to get the opportunity. And for me, without spending time thinking about what receivers are going to slot where, which ones are outside, which ones are inside. There's time to let them run out there on the field and see what the coaching staff has decided for that For me, it's just positions are getting thinner, and they haven't even played a game yet. That boundary safety has gotten thinner. The wide receiver core, which is there's this joke or this opinion that Justin Fuente sure as heck knows how to recruit receivers, because they were piling up the receivers early in his tenure. And you never would have thought 2 or 3 years ago you'd be sitting here in 2020 going, man, we're getting really thin in the receiving core. And that's with the 2 transfers you mentioned coming in and being available. So
you look at the rest of this receiver room, and in a way, Trey Turner's now the lead candidate to be the wide receiver one. But you look at everybody else with Payut out. Give me some names, Chris, of guys that could be stepping up here down the stretch.
Well, obviously, Changa Hodge and Evan Fairs. You don't bring in 1-year grad transfers unless you expect them to play heavily.
Yeah.
So they're both going to factor in. Evan Fairs is a definite outside receiver. He's one of those guys, I don't think he's going to make as many amazing end zone catches. I mean, Damon Hazelton, from an amazing place, a highlight reel standpoint, was amazing.
Yeah.
I don't think you can expect that of Evan Fairs, but Evan Fairs will catch that slant to beat Kentucky.
We hope.
So they're 2 different players, right? Changa Hodge is a guy who could be outside or inside. I think he'll be outside, but I don't know for sure. He's a good player. I think he'll help. Now he was a guy who got here a little bit late, and it's a brand new scheme for him coming from Villanova. Practices have been, sometimes they've been practicing and sometimes they haven't. So how far along is he in the scheme? I don't know. We don't know, but he's certainly a guy who can help. Your boy Caleb Smith is a guy who got some playing time early last year when Hazelton was out. He should be in the rotation. Tavion Robinson, of course. We've heard they've been working him on the outside some, just in case. And James Mitchell played in the slot. He's listed as a tight end, but he played in the slot a lot last season.
So if you move Robinson outside, then that really opens up the slot for Blackshear, and it'll be interesting to see how they use Raheem Blackshear.
Correct. Yeah, that's probably going to be the most interesting thing about this season is how Blackshear is used. Daryl Simmons was a guy who was going to help some, but he's hurt.
Yeah,
we've heard 4 to 6 weeks or something like that is what we've heard. And I think we heard that 2 weeks ago. But at any rate, he's not going to be available for the start of the season. So it's just your average fan is going to see some guys out there, and at first they're going to be like, "Who's that?"
Yeah.
That reminds me, roster cards.
Yeah, I was thinking about the roster when I was driving in this morning. So Virginia Tech finally updated the roster, sort of. A week and a half ago? Yeah. And people are like, "Oh, Will, when are you going to put the roster on your site?" And I said, I'm not doing that this year because every year. So this is, let's see, 30 words or less, 1 paragraph or less. The process of scraping the roster off of Hokiesports.com and putting it on the Tech Sideline taps into my old HTML skills from way back in the 90s. So I will cut and paste the code from Hokiesports.com, toss it in the notepad, do a lot of group replaces on all that CSS crap, for anybody that knows anything about web programming. It's a process. It takes time. It's difficult. So in past years, I made the mistake of, the roster's up, and I go through all this work to get it on TSL. Then they change heights and weights, and they change numbers, and players disappear and reappear. So we have no roster on Tech Sideline right now, but I was literally thinking in this morning, I need to text Pete Morris and say, so what's the status of the football roster?
Is that finalized? As much as it can be these days, right? And I'll say something about Payut. Offenses are most effective when they can threaten you both horizontally and vertically.
And they lost the vertical.
They lost the vertical. I mean, from that standpoint, I don't know that Virginia Tech has had that kind of offense since, I don't know, Eddie Royal maybe. Eddie Royal was a guy who could stretch you vertically, but he could also get it on the jet sweep if we were creative enough to actually do that back then. Now, Andre Davis for sure. I mean, that 99-2000 offense with Andre Davis, Vic, Suggs, that could stretch you vertically and
but
horizontally.
the whole Danny Cole, Jarrett Boykin era, no.
Right. There wasn't. I think Virginia Tech, they have a very, very good horizontal threat. I mean, I know people hate the jet sweep, but we would have won.
Didn't it average 10 yards a carry
like
last
11, year? Yeah. and it set up a bunch of those huge plays to Dalton Keene and James Mitchell and all that, too.
Right,
I mean, it was we would have averaged about 10 points a game without the jet sweep last year, in all honesty. So the Virginia Tech is very good horizontally, and they'll be, I think, even better horizontally with Raheem Blackshear.
Yeah.
So there's not going to be very many teams out there that are as good attacking you horizontally as Virginia Tech, and they were about to have the vertical threat too. And that vertical threat has been taken away. And when you have a horizontal threat, if you're really good at both, you're really hard to game plan for.
Modern college football is all about spreading them out and getting the matchups.
Well, the issue with Paiute is the only issue with him as far as his speed is, does any Tech quarterback besides Quincy Patterson have the arm strength to actually get it to him once he gets behind the safeties?
Yeah,
I don't know if that would have been true.
You got to cut it loose early with a guy.
You got to cut it. Yeah, exactly. So, but it's a shame because I'm not saying he's exactly Andre Davis because I've never seen a Tech football player as fast as Andre Davis. So I don't think he's quite as fast as Davis, but he's still really, really fast. But he is bigger and stronger than Davis.
Wow.
So, Andre Davis didn't break out till he was a redshirt sophomore. He wasn't good as a redshirt freshman. So I'm not saying that Paiute was going to have some kind of breakout 50-catch redshirt freshman season, but at some point in his career he was going to be really, really, really good. But
now we got to wait.
And now he's not going to have that development. So he'll be a redshirt freshman again next year.
Basically.
Yeah.
Is it? Hey, quick question for you. What are the 3 words that Justin Fuente uses to describe his football team?
Hard, smart, tough.
If there was a 4th one, what do you think it would be?
Grit.
And it is time to mention one of the new sponsors of the Tech Sideline Podcast and Tech Sideline, Grit. Will, we've got 2 hats on the podcast that we throw them on every show.
So Malcolm tells me that my camera's gone haywire, so you won't be able to get a solo shot of me here, but I will turn towards the main camera and sport the Grit hat. So we'll repeat it. If you go to our website, just go to the menu, select more, our sponsors, and Grit is there, and you can get your very own Grit hat, Grit shirt. Still waiting on the masks from the guys. I got to email them and tease them about that. So
yeah, we're glad to have
get
them
ready.
On board.
It's time.
All right, and let's close the podcast with this before we get to the Facebook Live questions. I feel like we've talked about a lot of serious and dense topics today. Let's end with a positive note. I've been waiting to bring this one up. Jack Hollifield, one of the newest commitments to the class of 2021 for Virginia Tech, 3-star tight end, who is the younger brother of fan favorite linebacker Dax Hollifield. Chris, I know he's been listed on some sites as a linebacker, but it seems like Virginia Tech's going to use him as a tight end. What do we know about him?
I definitely view him as a tight end.
I haven't watched this film. Have you?
Yeah, it's the thing is, it's mostly defensive film, but I think his athleticism lines up more of a regular tight end. I think
right off the top of your head how tall, how much does he weigh?
6'3", 225, 230 right now.
I need to look it up.
I mean, that was, but I mean, all these numbers are from
a year ago.
A year, because there were no camps. You can't remeasure these guys, so we have no idea how big. I mean, he might be 245.
Could have grown another inch.
He might be 6'4", 245 right now, and nobody knows it. I mean, it's just impossible to know. Solid prospect. I think everybody thought, like, generally younger brothers tend to be higher recruited or higher ranked than the older brothers, and I think some people thought that about him early because he was showing up on recruiting boards when he was a freshman.
Yeah,
but his recruitment just didn't take off. I'm not exactly sure why that is, but he's a good, solid prospect, in my opinion.
And he's been in Blacksburg a lot.
So many times, and he needed to commit because Virginia Tech's got like 22 commitments, 21 commitments or something, and he needed to pull the trigger before they get to 25. Right,
and it was interesting because there was really no smoke around him, nothing going on.
Well, I mean, from the very beginning, we all expected him to commit to Virginia Tech, and then he didn't, and then he didn't, and then he didn't.
And we started thinking,
So after a while, you just forget about him, and you're thinking about, what defensive tackle are we going to sign, or are we going to sign a Mike, or blah blah blah, and then all of a sudden he commits out of the blue. Like when he committed, I think you texted me, he was like, Jack Hollifield just committed, and I was like, man, I about forgot about that dude.
So he's the second tight end of that class, so he could kind of be maybe the future of Virginia Tech tight ends.
Yeah, well, I think he's I would have to watch him closely, and he's not going to play football this year, so I'm not going to have an updated scouting report on exactly what he can do. Most of his past film is of a linebacker. I think the other tight end from down that way, from down around Charlotte, whose name I just forgot.
Is it Jared Gibble?
Yeah, it was Gibble. That's it. Thank you. It needed to be an O. It needs to be Gobble instead. But
Gibble gobble.
Gibble Gobble. I think he's probably maybe a little bit more of an H-back type, or as Hollyfield is more of a traditional tight end type. But I could be wrong about that. I haven't. It's been so long. Like I said, I mean, when he just went so long without committing to Virginia Tech, I forgot about him. I bet I haven't watched any of his films since like January.
Yeah.
So I've forgotten basically everything about him at this point. Yeah, but I do remember like thinking, yeah, I mean, he's certainly a good enough player. It'll just come down to, I mean, he's one of those guys like, I think he's probably a sure thing. Like I see a very, very small chance of him doing nothing with his college career. I also don't look at him and see like star power or anything like that. I see solid.
Well, if he's
fine.
And I say this with all love in the world, if he's a football meathead like Dax, then you need those guys in your program.
You absolutely do. Yeah.
All right, so real quick, name as many sibling pairings Virginia Tech football has had. Just start rattling them off. Who can you name?
So John Yetzi said that this is the 30th set of brothers. I don't know if Yetzi's list includes Don Strock and Terry Strock. Everybody knows about Don Strock, but Terry was, I believe, a wide receiver or a kickoff specialist or something like that.
See, I had no idea. Didn't he go on to coach at Tech?
Terry?
Yeah.
He did.
Yeah.
He did.
See,
he was a wide receiver coach.
Correct.
I think he was a kickoff.
See, I've heard like he was the Tech's wide receivers coach like back when their bowl streak started.
I think you're right.
Right. So I've always heard of Terry Strock, but I never knew that was Don Strock's brother. You learn something new every day.
So the Fullers, the Edmonds, who are the
Grims,
the
Vicks,
Edmonds,
the Vicks. Who are the offensive linemen? Help me out
the
here.
Wangs,
the Fork Union coaches.
Oh,
sons.
The Schumans. Yeah.
Kyle Chung and his dad. I know that's not sibling, but at least family.
Ed and David Wang. So you kind of go through it by position.
The Lewis brothers, defensive tackle.
Yes, and you mentioned the Fullers, right? They're kind of obvious.
And I said the Grims. Everybody forgets that Cody Grimm had a brother who was a walk-on at Tech, Chad Grimm.
Chad was a linebacker.
Didn't play very much. Yeah.
So it's an exercise to try to generate all 30 names.
So certainly
now don't cheat. If you Google Virginia Tech letter winners, you will be taken to a webpage on Hokie Sports which lists all of the letter winners in the history of Virginia Tech football alphabetically. So don't cheat.
I'll win the contest right here. The Quiche brothers. The two walk-on offensive linemen from California that were on the team a couple of years ago.
Wow. All right.
No, I'm the only one that would have got that one.
I think that's a great way to put it. To end the conversation there.
Cam Martin and Orion Martin?
Boom.
Cam and Orion Martin.
And again, really unique to think about Virginia Tech. I think a program that not many schools can say has that many siblings and brothers come play together. Just, history, tradition. You got all that here in Blacksburg at Virginia Tech. All right, he's been patiently waiting. He's been working hard behind the scenes.
Trying to get my camera working.
He's been trying to get his camera working. He is the hardest producer in the land. He is Malcolm Stewart. It's time for our Facebook Live questions. Malcolm,
is anybody
what's
asking
going on?
Questions?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
We'll start with Billy Lester. What do you think about Lay's and Foo's exchange over Twitter comments bashing VT's postponement of the UVA game?
Now, wait a minute. Laser and Foo had an exchange over Twitter?
No. It was Tech Talk Live. You should read the articles I put on the site sometimes.
No, I know, but the way he phrased it, he said something like, "What do you think of Lay's and Foo's exchange over Twitter?"
Right. It was about
Twitter.
It was about Twitter. It was about
it being
Right. It was about what the UVA players were saying after the game got.
So all right. So what did Laser ask and what did Foo say?
I don't forget the exact quote, and I forget how the question was phrased, but Foo didn't really talk about the UVA players. He just went on a rant about how Twitter sucks, basically. So that was pretty much what that was all about. And then I think he ended that with saying, "Look, I called Bronco on Saturday because I thought he needed to hear it from me while we weren't playing,
right?
Instead of just reading articles about it and seeing social media
Evans
reports."
actually got it.
Oh, great.
And this was a question on how seriously the players have taken the situation. Again, this is Tech Talk Live that aired on Monday. Fuente said, quote, Twitter is a cesspool for people to sit on the couch and throw tomatoes at people. It's just the world we live in today. It's kind of gotten to that point that it's a rush to go grab your phone and weigh in on something as if you're an expert and know what's happening behind the scenes. To be honest with you, we do take that personally. Our kids have taken this very seriously and worked very hard throughout this, close quote. And then he talked more, but that's the paragraph that I read.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Yep, that was a pretty good one.
I like it. A throw tomatoes at people.
So do you get the reference?
Some people don't say he's entertaining.
No, I have no idea what the reference is.
So people who say he's not entertaining, they actually don't read our Tech Talk live notes because he actually does stuff like that a lot.
There are certain venues in which he's relaxed, and that's one of them.
Yep.
He likes talking
Is
to
throwing
John
tomatoes
Rogers.
at people somehow tied in with Office Space?
I believe the way it used to work was that if you were performing in a play and you were poor, that the audience would throw like fruits and vegetables. at you.
That's exactly what it was.
It's a thing that people of my generation grew up knowing. I think it comes from watching cartoons and watching Bugs Bunny get tomatoes thrown at him. But it occurred to me after Fu said that, I'm like, I don't think the younger generation really gets that reference. But that's what it is.
It's what people did way back. I mean, I've read stuff from I've heard descriptions of that happening. Like you could see it like at a play in like the 19th century or even
Shakespearean days, right? Does it go back that far?
It might go back that far, but as far as what our country is, like I know it was happening here in like the 19th century at plays and things, and even like at like political rallies and speeches and things like that. Not
so
to
there
get into
you go.
that.
You just learned something.
There we go.
Yep.
You learn something new every day.
But
Great.
you don't hear people use that phrase.
Fuente, he went on in that answer and he talked about, back in the day, you'd meet your coworker at the water cooler or the coffee pot, and
right?
You'd talk, and now you just go to Twitter. And yeah.
So yeah, when we started Hokie Central and Tech Sideline and had the message boards going, it horrified all these athletic administrators, the things fans were saying.
Right.
And I always used to say it's the same stuff they've always said. They're just saying it out where people can read it now.
Let me continuing on that quote actually. Quote, everybody can put their opinions out in the world now. What used to be said at the coffee pot or the water cooler gets said online to whoever wants to listen. That's what comes with it. Absolutely, it bothers us. We try not to put too much stock into it, but we know where it's coming from, and we take it personal, close quote.
So my message to coaches and players is people have been saying that stuff forever. They've been saying mean stuff about coaches and players. It's all out there in print now where anybody can read it. So don't take it too seriously.
And it works the other way. People learn a lot more about players these days than they ever wanted to know by how those players, by what they tweet about and things like that. Mm-hmm. It works both ways.
Yep.
Thanks for the question.
All right, from David French, what do you guys think about the claim that Clemson had a COVID party? Liability to the school?
Oh God, I expect there's been a lot of COVID parties on college campuses. I think Dabo let his guys do what college kids do, and I think I don't think he was particularly bothered by it. I don't think he intentionally got them together and said, "I want you guys to get the coronavirus right now because that's going to give us a better chance to play if you get it right now early."
Now back then the protocols were not publicly printed by the AC.
Right.
They didn't exist actually.
Right.
Everybody knew keep your distance, all that stuff, but the conference hadn't come out and said. And also, once practice started, the press wasn't crawling all over practice and taking pictures, but there were pictures being released. We're talking about a time, June or whatever, where the teams were doing their thing and nobody was really there paying attention.
Right.
I'm not going to accuse anybody of anything. I'm just going to say that, It may have been a little bit more relaxed, and
I don't think Clemson changed very much. I'll put it that way. That's what the guy said on.
Did we talk about this on the podcast the other day? Where I was listening to Packer and Durham, and Tom Luganbill talked about watching. Was it BYU that played Navy?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Watching BYU just trample Navy, and the Navy coach saying that they basically hadn't had any contact drills, and it showed. And the question that Packer had for Luganville was, why did Clemson look so good? And Luganville said, I don't think Clemson's really changed the way they do things, and that's why they look as good as they do.
Orgeron came out yesterday and said most of their team has had it.
Yeah.
And it's amazing the teams that are really, really, really good at football, they're not having any coronavirus problems now. I think one of the reasons they're really good at football is they don't care what people think of them. They will do whatever it takes to win, whether we're talking about coronavirus, whether we're talking about recruiting, any of that stuff.
Well, it's that SEC attitude
Sure.
if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. And so you take a school like Virginia Tech. Let's say Virginia Tech got caught with a bagman handing out shoeboxes full of $10,000. Tech fans would flip out, and they'd pass judgment and get all, as a group, they would flip out and get all preachy. Do you think Alabama's fan base flips out and gets all preachy when they get caught?
Alabama and Auburn are all right. So I don't mean this as, I'm not saying either one is right or either one is wrong, but Virginia Tech, the indoor practice facility got held up for 10 years because of the Stadium Woods issue, right? I mean, so they couldn't get that resolved for 10 years, and in that 10 years we got passed from a facility standpoint.
Yeah.
The Auburn-Alabama rivalry, they literally murder each other's historical trees on campus, right? So that's just a different mentality there.
Yeah, and again, we're not accusing anybody of anything. We're just saying they just kind of tend to plow ahead,
right?
Regardless.
Yeah,
of
they don't care what people think of them.
They're just there to win football games.
Yeah,
There you go.
All right, from Damian Brink, what are the chances they shut the whole thing down? No chance they let us play for the ACC championship game if we can't make up canceled games.
I would actually say close to zero.
Yeah, they're not going to shut it down.
Yeah.
The Big Ten is starting to roll forward. They announced this morning that they're going to start a season on October 24th. Virginia Tech's going to play at some point.
I think Damien was specifically asking about Virginia Tech.
Tech. I don't see that happening. At all. And it's specifically written in the ACC rules that the teams with the two best winning percentages will go to the ACC championship game. Now, an issue here is okay, what if one team goes 9-1 in the ACC, 90% winning percentage, and another team only go
4-0.
4-0, right? That's 100% winning percentage, but they only played 4 games. So is there a cutoff point in there? Do you have to play a certain number? Do you have to play 75% of your ACC games?
And the ACC didn't even want to put a number on it at that point.
Point in time,
yeah.
I think they're going to wait a while and clarify it later.
I think so.
I think they're just going to wait and see how the situation goes. My personal opinion is it's not going to matter because, I think it'll probably be Notre Dame, although I could be wrong.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think Tech is off to such a late start. I'm very, very worried that they're going to lose their first game because of their lack of practice and lack of conditioning. I think they're better than NC State. I think they're better than Duke, but
they're getting behind.
But they're getting behind those teams in terms of conditioning, and if Duke happens to be their first game, Duke will have already played 3 games.
Yeah, and that's tough to win.
It's tough to win in a situation like that. So it's possible that Tech could be starting from a hole to begin with. So I'm not even worried about the ACC championship game right now. I don't care.
I just want to try to get some games in.
I want to play a football game with a team where we have a chance to win, where we're on the same ground, where we have most of our team ready to go and they're in football shape. I don't know when that's going to be.
Yeah.
Let's do one more.
One more.
All right, last question from Eric Fisher. With less practice and strength and conditioning time, are we looking at a lot of possible injuries this year?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the soft tissue issues have mounted up anyway.
Yeah.
When we say Tech had 60 guys out recently, we mean from positive tests, contact tracing, and injuries. Right. So it's been rough already because they didn't have a full preseason. And, I have a personal trainer for a reason. That extra motivation of working out with other people, it's a big difference.
Yeah.
I don't care if you can sit there behind a computer screen and say, "Oh, our guys didn't keep themselves in shape. They ought to be running and things like that." And these are people, man.
We are social creatures.
Right. And some people are individually motivated. If they're isolated and they don't see anybody for months, yeah, they're going to come up with physical activities and keep themselves in shape to a certain extent. Other people aren't.
Right.
And football players are people too. And I mean, honestly, people think these guys are robots sometimes.
They're really not.
And they're not.
Particularly college kids.
Exactly.
I think you wrote in your article, these guys like to play video games just as much as myself and Malcolm do. I mean, so, all right, great questions from everyone on Facebook Live. Always great to have an interactive show with everybody. And so we are at an hour and 15 minutes. That's typically the point where we need
It's
to wrap
interesting.
things.
I didn't think this one was going to go as long, but it did.
It did.
Well, I don't think we've ever done a podcast where we said, man, that went a lot shorter than I thought it would.
I always prep for these, and then I always get to about 3 or 4 topics. I'm like, this is going to be enough. We're going to get to an hour easily on just these 3 or 4. So another great show. Chris, any idea what's coming up on TechSideline.com this week? Friday
We have
Q&A?
no idea.
I'm going to run a Dwight Vick article today,
Yeah.
one of his interviews. I haven't decided which one yet, but we're due for
How
one of
often
those.
has he been doing those?
I don't know how often he's been doing them recently. I know like during the summer when everything was quarantined, he was pumping them out 1 or 2 a week. He was doing a whole bunch of them. But there's still some more out there that I haven't run. And I'll pick one today and run it. And Brandon Patterson, I noticed, also sent us an article today, so I'll schedule that one for tomorrow. Thank God, because I'm out of stuff to write.
Yeah, Chris was telling me, let's do a podcast today because I don't really have anything to
I mean, I scheduled my day planner. I was gonna the UVA preview was coming out tomorrow. I was gonna be spending this afternoon writing it, and so and I'm out of previews, right? Like in last week's Q&A, I said, well, I'm out of time to do the special teams review, so I'll just ask myself a question in the Q&A so I can talk about special teams. That'll serve as my special teams preview. Next week we go full in the game week with UVA, and then the UVA game got canceled, so I've been. So I'm out of ideas. So yeah, please don't cancel the NC State game because I'm out of stuff.
Football.
I'm out of ideas about stuff to write.
Well, you're not out of Virginia Tech athletic events, though. Women's soccer back in action. They open up on Saturday in Charlottesville against UVA. Volleyball opens their season tomorrow on the ACC Network at 4 o'clock against the Citadel. And men's soccer gets underway shortly. So we are starting to get some
So volleyball is going to be on the ACC Network.
tomorrow at 4 o'clock against the Citadel.
All right, cool.
So that'll do it for us here. Episode 134 of the Tech Sideline Podcast. It was a lengthy one. We discussed a lot, and we hope you enjoyed it. And we're looking forward to, hopefully, as football season gets back into the swing of things, having these podcasts at least once a week, hopefully twice a week. So.
Yes, and many thanks to Jonathan Fisher and the Grit Gear guys and Campus Emporium and Southeast Regional Training Center. That'll
do it for us. For our managing editor, Chris Coleman, our founder and general manager, Will Stewart, the best producer in the land, Malcolm Stewart. I'm Evan Hughes saying so long. Thanks so much for watching and listening to episode 134 of the Tech Sideline Podcast, brought to you by the Fisher Law Firm. Have a great week, Hokies.